Good evening. It's Tuesday, the 20th of May, and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. The phone call. President Trump holds a high-stakes conversation with Russian President Putin on ceasefire negotiations. Tactical shift. The United Kingdom achieves its largest reset of defense and trade relations with the European Union since Brexit. Taking chances. Experts raise endangered crocodiles to prevent or at least delay species extinction.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Amarsha Fernando.
Good evening once again. US President Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin and said Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire. However, the Kremlin has stated that reaching an agreement would take time.
We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday said Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and an end to their 3-year-old war after holding a call with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place.
After the call with Trump, Putin told reporters in Sochi that efforts to end the war were generally on the right track.
Президент Соединенных Штатов высказал свою позицию.
The U.S. president has expressed his position on the ceasefire, and I, for my part, also noted that Russia also favors a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. We should simply determine the most effective ways to move toward peace. We agreed with the U.S. president that Russia will suggest and is ready to work with the Ukrainian side on a memorandum on a possible future peace treaty, which defines a number of issues such as the principles of settlement, the terms of a possible peace agreement, and so on, including a possible ceasefire for a certain period of time if the appropriate agreements are reached.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to Trump one-on-one before the Putin call and then again afterwards in a conversation with other European leaders. He told reporters that he hoped a high-level meeting with Russia, the U.S., and other nations could happen as soon as possible.
We
are considering a meeting of all teams again. We would like it to be at a high level. America, Ukraine, Russia, European countries, and Great Britain. Such a meeting could take place in Turkey, the Vatican, or Switzerland.
Ukraine has said it is ready for a ceasefire now, while Russia has said conditions must be met first. Direct talks last week between Moscow and Kyiv had failed to achieve a truce.
Look, I'd say we're more than open to walking away.
Shortly before the Trump-Putin call, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters that Washington recognized there was a bit of an impasse.
Look, I think one open question is Vladimir Putin serious about negotiating peace, right? He has made some concessions. He has taken some serious steps in these conversations, but we feel like, we're at a point where we're hitting an impasse, and that's why the president is talking to him on the phone. I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war.
Trump, who has promised to bring a swift end to Europe's deadliest war since World War II, has repeatedly called for a ceasefire. Putin, whose forces control a fifth of Ukraine and are advancing, has stood firm on his conditions for ending the war, despite public and private pressure from Trump and repeated warnings from European powers.
Coming to the region now, residents of India's Bengaluru were wading through knee-high floodwater today as deaths related to the floods rose to 3, according to media reports.
The local municipal corporation commissioner in Bengaluru said the downstream canal lacked sufficient carrying capacity and directed his team to identify a solution to prevent further clogging. According to the Indian Meteorological Department, moderate to heavy rainfall is expected to persist until day after tomorrow. Rapid growth of southern city dubbed India's Silicon Valley has left many waterways covered or used as dumps, leading to water stagnating every year during heavy rains. Meanwhile, in the northeastern city of Guwahati, heavy rainfall left several streets submerged, forcing residents to wade through flooded roads. India, with 1.4 billion people, relies on rainfall to support its population, many of whom live off and rely on farming. However, excessive rainfall can cause floods, especially due to poor drainage systems.
Members of the World Health Organization voted emphatically in favor of a potentially groundbreaking global treaty on improving pandemic preparedness at the World Health Assembly.
124 countries voted in favor after Slovakia called for a vote yesterday as its COVID-19 vaccine skeptic Prime Minister demanded that his country challenge the adoption of the agreement. No countries voted against, while 11 countries, including Poland, Israel, Italy, Russia and Slovakia and Iran, abstained. The Director General of the World Health Organization stated that governments from all over the world are making their countries and our interconnected global community more equitable, healthier and safer from threats posed by pathogens and viruses of pandemic potential. The draft accord, which addresses structural inequities about how drugs or vaccines and health tools are developed, following lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic which killed millions of people in 2020 to 2022, was formally adopted today in plenary session at the World Health Assembly in Geneva. However, it will not formally come into effect until an annex on pathogen sharing is negotiated, which could take up to 2 years, after which states will have to ratify the accord. Following the 3 years of difficult negotiations, the agreement has been seen by many diplomats and analysts as a victory for global cooperation at a time when multilateral organizations like WHO have been battered by sharp cuts in US foreign funding. US negotiators left the discussions after President Donald Trump began a 12-month process of withdrawing the United States, by far the WHO's largest financial backer, from the agency when he took office in January. Given this, the United States would not be bounded by the pact.
Israel continued its airstrikes across Gaza Strip on Monday, increasing pressure on Hamas. While it targeted some 160 sites throughout the enclave, Israel also began letting in humanitarian aid amid global concerns of a famine crisis.
The Israeli military, which recently launched Operation Gideon's Chariots, aimed at recapturing the Gaza Strip, announced it has struck some 160 targets, including Hamas infrastructure. Airstrikes also targeted several hospitals across the enclave. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a video statement on the same day, vowing to make progress amid fierce fighting, adding that Israel will take control of the entire Gaza Strip. The remark was slammed by Britain, France, and Canada, who were critical of Israel's expansion of its war, as they vowed a concrete response if Israel's campaign continues. Also, following pressure from around the globe over the blocking of any humanitarian aid into the region, Israel has begun allowing some trucks carrying necessities.
Today, Israel is facilitating the entry of trucks with baby food into Gaza. In the coming days, Israel will facilitate the entry of dozens of aid trucks.
The Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry, Eden Bartal, said Israel always complies with international law and with its obligations and statements. However, he was critical of the recent condemnation, saying the international community must decide whether to side with Israel or Hamas. He added that the aid that began coming in will only cover a few days. The Foreign Ministry official also stressed that the humanitarian aid is to help the population, not to support Hamas.
Let's go for a short commercial break. More world news coming right after this. Welcome back. The United Kingdom struck the most significant reset of defense and trade ties with the European Union since Brexit, after US President Trump's upending of the global order pushed the two sides to move on from their bitter divorce.
It marks a new era in our relationship.
Britain struck a deal with the European Union on Monday that will see the most significant reset of defense and trade ties since Brexit. It comes after US President Donald Trump's upending of the global order pushed the two sides to move on from their bitter divorce. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the agreement a win-win.
It gives us unprecedented access to the EU market, the best of any country outside of the EU or EFTA, all while sticking to the red lines in our manifesto about not rejoining the single market, the customs union, and no return to freedom of movement.
At the heart of the reset is a new defence and security pact. It will let Britain be part of any joint procurement and pave the way for British companies to take part in a $167 billion programme to rearm Europe. Britain said the deal will also cut red tape for food and agricultural producers, making food cheaper, improve energy security, and add about $12 billion to the economy by 2040. A contentious new fishing agreement was signed and a limited youth mobility scheme was outlined, while British visitors will have faster access to the EU by way of airport e-gates.
This is the story of historical and natural partners standing side by side on the global stage.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen highlighted the importance of finding solutions together as allies. Relations were poisoned by years of post-Brexit arguments, but collaboration between Britain and European powers over Ukraine and Trump has rebuilt trust between the two sides. Monday's agreement was denounced by Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage, whose anti-immigration Reform Party has seen a recent rise in popularity, putting pressure on the Labour government. The deal was also criticised by the opposition Conservative Party, which oversaw the 2016 Brexit vote and spent years negotiating the original divorce deal.
The New Zealand government today deferred the vote over the rare suspension of 3 Indigenous lawmakers from Parliament following the performance of a haka, the Maori ceremonial dance, during the reading of a contentious bill last year.
A Parliamentary Privileges Committee last week recommended temporarily to suspend the 3 Te Pāti Maori parliamentarians for acting in a manner that could have been affected of intimidating a member of the House. The members performed a haka last November ahead of a vote on a bill that would have reinterpreted a 184-year-old treaty between the British and the indigenous Maori. Co-leaders of the Te Pāti Maori, Debbie Nagrewa-Packer and Rawiri Waititi, should be suspended for 21 days, and Te Pāti Maori representative Hana Rawiti Maipi Clark for 7 days, the committee said. Chris Bishop, who is the leader of the House, said delaying the vote would allow the suspended members to participate in the federal budget scheduled day after tomorrow. The vote will take place following the budget. Several protesters gathered outside the parliament in Wellington for the vote over the suspensions, and New Zealand media reported they might perform a haka in support of the Maori lawmakers. Judith Collins, who heads the Privileges Committee and serves as Attorney General, told Parliament that the haka forced the Speaker to suspend proceedings for 30 minutes and that no permission had been sought to perform it.
The US Supreme Court has led Donald Trump's administration in temporary protected status of Venezuelans. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan immigrants has been allowed to remain in the US by Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden.
The U.S. Supreme Court has let Donald Trump's administration end temporary protected status for Venezuelans. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan immigrants have been allowed to remain in the U.S. by Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden. On Monday, the court granted the Justice Department's request to lift a lower court's order that had, in turn, halted a decision by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to terminate the protection granted to Venezuelans. The Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, is a humanitarian designation under U.S. law for countries stricken by war, natural disaster, or other catastrophes, giving recipients living in the United States deportation protection and access to work permits. Monday's brief order from the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, was unsigned, as is typical when it acts on an emergency request. Liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was the sole justice to publicly dissent. The court left open the door to challenges by migrants if Trump's administration tries to cancel work permits or other TPS-related documents that were issued to expire in October 2026, the end of the TPS period extended by Biden. The Department of Homeland Security has said nearly 350,000 Venezuelans were registered under Biden's 2023 TPS designation. The decision comes as Trump moves to ramp up deportations as part of his hardline approach to immigration. He has pledged to deport record numbers of migrants in the United States illegally and has moved to strip certain migrants of temporary legal protections, expanding the pool of possible deportees. Monday's order is a separate case from Trump's targeted deportations of Venezuelan migrants under the Alien Enemies Act, who he has accused of being members of the criminal Tren de Aragua gang. The court kept a block on those deportations in place last Friday.
Now for the updates on the collision of the Brooklyn Bridge. Officials state that the investigation into why a Mexican Navy training ship struck the Brooklyn Bridge on Saturday, shearing the top of its mast, will look into a possible engine failure and the role of a tugboat that assisted it in the backyard of its pier.
Officials are investigating why a Mexican Navy training ship hit the Brooklyn Bridge on Saturday, smashing its masts. The crash left 2 people dead and 20 more injured. On Monday, the National Transportation Safety Board said it is looking at the role of a tugboat that helped the ship leave the pier. The engine is another key focus, says NTSB lead investigator Brian Young.
We will look at the status of the engine, we'll look for any failures, we'll look for engine inspections, and we'll talk to the crew on what may have possibly occurred with the engine. And additionally, if the engine has any sort of ECM or electronic control modules, we'll grab that electronic evidence as well.
The accident occurred when the Cuauhtémoc, a tall ship with masts and rigging, left Pier 17 on the East River after sunset on Saturday. Videos online showed the tug pushing the ship's bow, then pulling away as it neared the bridge. It then rushed to the stern, seeming to try to stop the ship from hitting the bridge. The strike knocked dozens of naval cadets off the ship's crossbeams, who were ceremoniously standing there while the ship left the harbor. They could be seen dangling from their harnesses high above the ship's deck. The 2 who died were a sailor and a cadet. NTSB board member Michael Graham said they plan to speak with the tugboat pilot, ship captain, and crew.
We will be looking into 3 main areas while we're on scene. First being the crew and the operation of the crew, the vessel and the condition of the vessel, and finally the environment, and that includes the weather, the wind, the current, the tide, and the operating environment of that.
Investigators are seeking more videos and haven't confirmed if the ship had a data recorder.
Time for a short commercial break now. We'll be right back. And welcome back. A group of Venezuelan biologists and veterinarians are raising hatchlings of the endangered Orinoco crocodiles and releasing them into the wild in a bid to prevent or at least delay its extinction.
Conservationists say there are fewer than 100 Orinoco crocodiles left in the wild. They live here in the Orinoco River Basin, which covers most of Venezuela and spills into Colombia. In a bid to avoid the extinction of one of the world's largest living reptiles, the Venezuelan crocodile specialist group have been raising their young, but they say they are losing this race against time. Decades of poaching for leather pushed the Orinoco crocodile to the brink. Omar Hernandez, a biologist and head of Venezuelan conservation foundation FUDECHI, says poverty among Venezuelans means they are now hunted for a different reason. The scientists collect the eggs or hatchlings from where crocodiles are known to nest. They also breed captive adults kept at a zoo and a biodiversity center and cattle ranch in central Venezuela. The babies are raised until they are about a year old and grow to a weight of around 13 pounds. Every year, the group releases around 200 young crocs into the wild. But Hernandez is never confident of their survival due to a lack of awareness among the general public. The members of the crocodile specialist group are not getting any younger either. The next generation of biologists have mostly fled turmoil in Venezuela for jobs elsewhere.
And finally tonight, in a surprising Mother's Day discovery, a mother found her 2-year-old daughter has escaped her crib with the help of a 4-year-old sibling. A video from the children's room revealed their early morning escape plan.
These siblings are partners in crime, orchestrating an early morning crib escape. Naomi Rukim of New York says she was quite surprised to see her 2-year-old daughter Bella had gotten out of her crib, seemingly all by herself the morning of Mother's Day. She had to see it for herself, so she played back the video recording from a camera in the children's room and learned that Bella had an accomplice, 4-year-old brother Max. The bright boy found he could separate the crib from the mattress and give Bella an opening to slide under the frame. The whole escape took a matter of minutes. Mom later had Max demonstrate how he pulled it off.
I moved this ball and then she came out and I said, "Slug on the bed, slug on the bed."
Proud of his handiwork, he also showed the crib's weaknesses. Now his parents are going to have to figure out a way to secure the crib to prevent future breakouts.
And with that, we come to the end of today's edition of World News Tonight. With the hopes of seeing you again, I'm Marsha Fernando, and we leave you tonight with the visuals of Taiwan's tech show Computex. Also, don't forget to send us your feedback through email at feedback.ad24english@derana.lk or via WhatsApp in 076-805-7933. Prasansa Gunawardana will be joining you next with the nightly business report. Until then, thank you for watching and have a great night.